Everybody, welcome back to Core 52 videos. My name is Jeremy. We are in week 40, talking about God's solution to racism. So today I get to put Ryan in the seat here to be interviewed. So first time for him. Actually, he's normally interviewing people, but he gets to be the interviewee.
This is the first time I'm in the hot seat. That's what I'm calling it.
You're in the hot seat, yeah, in the hot seat. So kind of turning the tables today and talking about racism, what God says about it in the Bible. So first question I have for you, what do we see when we look at the Old Testament? What does the Old Testament say about race and about racial division?
I think that's such an interesting question. And the thing I love about looking at it in the Old Testament is really, I think it just boils down to one thing, and that is diversity was God's idea. I mean, if you look even as early on in the book of Genesis, I think it's like, Genesis 9 after the flood, when Noah's 3 sons, they all go different directions, and that was kind of a part of some separation, not division, but separation, differences. And then just a couple of chapters after that, you've got the whole story of the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament. The people were coming together and they were going to build this ladder or this tower to heaven, and God saw that without their languages being different, that they could probably do it. And so that's when He instituted different languages. And so I love the fact that diversity was His idea. But also going back to Genesis 1 and 2, the creation story, we're all created in His image. But that being said, He made us all so diverse. I just love that.
Yeah. So looking at moving from the Old Testament to the New Testament, kind of the author talks about, people will sometimes say, oh, well, Jesus doesn't talk about racial reconciliation. He doesn't talk about race, about divisions, about anything. He's only focused on the Jewish people.
Right.
So how would you answer that? How would you talk about that?
Yeah, so, I mean, if you go back to the Old Testament again, I mean, the Jewish people were God's chosen people. That doesn't mean that they were superior to any other race. It just means that that's the race God chose to do His redemptive plan through. And then in the New Testament, a lot of people are like, well, Jesus never really had anything to do with the Gentiles or those that weren't Jewish. He kind of stayed away from them, in fact. And I would argue that. I would say He didn't necessarily do that. But I would say that Jesus' mission, again, was through the Jewish race. I mean, that's how He accomplished His mission. And then, reconciled us, those of us who aren't Jewish, into His plan. But again, I think it would hinge, if I could just say one thing that Jesus said, it hinges on Jesus, it would be the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28. He said, go into all nations, which literally means all people. We think about it in terms of countries.
Right.
But that phrase there, that word there, is literally all people groups. Okay. And so Jesus' command or commission to us was to go to all different races, all different people groups.
So all the different ethnicities.
All the different ethnicities.
Groups.
That's right. Cool. That word, that's the word, is ethnos. So all the different ethnic groups was His command. Which
is important. I mean, just to know that Jesus called us not just to people that look like us, but to everyone.
Absolutely.
Everyone needs to hear the message of the gospel.
Yeah, and I would challenge anybody who thinks Jesus didn't cross racial lines or ethnic lines to go back and read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you'll see that He actually did, and He did it in several cases.
So the book of Acts kind of answers some of these questions as well. Just Jesus talks about going out to all people groups, and so we see in the book of Acts where they did that.
Right.
And so where the apostles, the disciples actually went to all the people groups.
Right.
So what does it look like in the book of Acts? How did they deal with race, with the divisions that were there as they reached out to non-Jews?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to be honest with ourselves. I mean, when the disciples started the church, really in Acts, after Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit comes, I mean, they still kind of had this interpretation that their mission was to take the gospel to the Jews. I mean, to take it to their people. And that's primarily what they did early on. But then you had the whole story with Saul, who was persecuting the Jewish people or Christians, becoming a Christian, and he really began to take it as his task, or that was his calling, to take the gospel story to the Gentiles and or to anybody who wasn't Jewish. And Peter and Paul had some harsh They really had some conflict about that. And
Just a little bit.
Well, I think it's important for us to know that because, I mean, even in our day, we have conflict over these things. And I think it's important for us to realize that it happened in the first century as well with the early church.
Right.
Of course, is it Acts 10, where Peter has his vision? And the result of that vision is that the gospel story is for everyone. But even after that, Paul primarily concentrated on those outside the Jewish race, where Peter primarily concentrated on those inside the Jewish race. And so their viewpoint changed, but the way they practiced that didn't really change. I think it was primarily just because of their strengths of who they related to. But we see that dramatic shift in the book of Acts and how they carried out the Great Commission by going to all ethnic groups, not just one.
Yeah, so you've got the focus on the Jewish people, focus on the non-Jews, working together.
Right.
And so really having these parallel paths that are happening to reach all people.
Absolutely. And if you continue to read Paul's writings, Ephesians, Galatians, I mean, you see over and over Paul talk about how we are adopted into the family, we're redeemed, and that was Jesus's plan from the beginning, or God's plan from the beginning, is that he would make a way for all of us to become one family, which was Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2.
Right.
That's his redemption plan through the entire story, or the entire narrative of the Bible.
Yeah. So racism is something that historically in this country has been an issue. It's been a problem since this country was founded. There have been different movements over the years and over the generations to help address some of those issues. But as we've learned here this year in 2020, it's still there.
Oh.
It is not left.
No.
Unfortunately, you know. So as Christians, as followers of Christ, I mean, what is our solution to racism? How do we address this? How do we answer kind of the questions that are looming?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think this year has definitely shown us that racism still exists. And I might even argue is more intense now than it has been in some years past. And I think we can kind of lump that in with everything is polarized these days. I mean, racism, politics, even things on COVID, mask, no mask. I mean, we're polarized on everything. And I'm reading a book right now called The Coddling of the American Mind. It's a great book. You should check it out, Coddling of the American Mind. But it talks about our polarization and how the reason we're polarized right now is because we don't have a common enemy. So we don't, after 9/11, the country was united more than it's probably been in several periods in its history because there was a common enemy, right? But the answer to your question, I don't think, is finding a common enemy as much as it is finding a common uniter. And I think that uniter is Jesus. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, vote this way, vote that way. If you prefer to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. The thing we have in common, the banner that we all have over us, is Jesus.
Right.
And I think as Christians, I think as the church, we have to focus on that common piece, the piece of Jesus Christ, the Messiah. And in that, I personally think that's the only way we're going to find reconciliation. And I think it goes back to what you and I have been talking about here today, is that's because Jesus made us all in his image. Red, white, black, yellow, blue, it doesn't matter. We're made all in his image. Diversity was his idea. He created us to be diverse and to be different. And if you read through the narrative of Scripture, like we've been talking about, he is the one that brings diversity into likeness or into oneness or into unity. And I think that is the answer for the church. And I think that's what we have to be focused on to find reconciliation and redemption between the races.
So focusing on Christ and our diversity and how God has made us all unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Recognizing that Christ made us diverse. He wants us to be diverse. And I mean, imagine if we were all the same. That would just be a terrible, boring world, right? So he made us diverse, and he wants us to find the unity in him.
Yes.
Yeah, which was his plan, and talking about Jesus and how he did all that redemption. I mean, that's the answer.
Yes. Well, great word. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I'm not sure if I enjoy sitting in the hot seat or not, but I can tell you I always enjoy having these conversations with you. And you've taught me so much about this, and I continue to learn from you and others about this. And so just appreciate your willingness to have these conversations with us.
Well, thank you. Always glad to have the conversations, and it's always good to share and talk and
absolutely
kind of about our life experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what we're talking about today with Core 52. If you want more resources, we actually did a podcast called Pull Up a Chair that the church is hosting. And so the first episode was my wife, Ginger, and I actually talking about interracial marriages. And so Ryan actually interviewed us for that one. And so check out the podcast. You can find that on YouTube page, as well as any podcasting platform. Great opportunity to learn more about what it means and what God means for the races. Also, if you have any other questions or comments, feel free to comment on our video. We'd love to hear your thoughts about it and what things we can do to serve you well as we love each other, as we lean into our uniqueness and how God has made us all different. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.